this is something I don't think we teach young people well. And one of the things, you may remember this, that was so striking about the tour was that I made a case fairly consistently that most people find the meaning that sustains them through the vicissitudes of life, not in happiness, but in responsibility. And that would bring everyone to a halt. It would always make the whole theater silent. It's like, oh, I never thought of that connection. Because maybe you want to avoid responsibility, and you can understand why.
I think that's also, it's a perfect segue to chapter 3, which is do not hide unwanted things in the fog, which seems to me we live in a constant state of distraction now. You've mentioned Twitter a couple of times. It's like, is Twitter bringing any of us happiness, or is it keeping us all in a constant state of fog? The overload and the endless obsession with politics, that all seems like a fog to me. I do my August off the grid, and I do that. Yeah. I do that to get out of the fog.
Distraction is definitely fog, and you'll distract yourself. I think you distract yourself mostly when your conscience is bothering you, because you don't want to face what it is in your life that is uncomfortable. That chapter is again quite practical. It's a reminder to pay attention often to negative emotion, resentment, and that sort of thing, because it can tell you. Well, resentment is very useful. Maybe your partner is talking to someone and they're a little bit more animated than you'd like, and you get jealous, and that jealousy is associated with a whole set of insecurities. Or maybe they're flirting and they shouldn't be. It's not that easy to determine, and maybe you'll have a big fight about that, but you could just as well pretend that didn't happen. The emotion comes up. I'm jealous, I'm resentful. It's associated with experiences like that in the past. The psychoanalysts would have called that a complex. You could notice that. You could think, well, should I be jealous? Is there something wrong with me, or there's something wrong with my partner, or there's something wrong with the relationship? And you have to untangle that, and who knows what you'll have to untangle to get that straight. Or you can bear the jealousy and see what'll happen in the relationship, or maybe it'll disintegrate because your partner is flirting and you ignore that. It's not like you repress it exactly. And this chapter is an attempt to distinguish repression from this hiding in the fog. It's that you get a hint that something's wrong, and then you have to unpack that hint to pull the information out. So maybe your partner is flirting and they shouldn't be. And so then you have to find out why they're dissatisfied with the relationship, or what's tempting them, or what is crooked in their soul at the moment, or what they're dissatisfied about. Terrible journey of exploration and discovery. That's always presented as something that's positive. It's often not at all. It's so hard. It's like doing surgery on a suppurating wound. It's no wonder people avoid it. But it's not helpful. Because all it does is leave that those things grow and multiply in the dark. And if you ignore them, they just cascade.
Do you think that's just self-protection for most people? That most people, they see it, they know that truth behind them, whether it's about their partner or whatever it might be, but it's just self-protection, like, oh, I just got to keep moving on as things are, that we're just creatures of habit, or something like that? Well,
sometimes it's that, and it especially gets to be that if it's accumulated for a long time, because if you wouldn't deal with it when it was a kitten, you're not going to deal with it when it's a full-grown lion.
Yeah.
And so, but I think mostly it's something else I return to in the book is it's deceit, resentment, and arrogance. I already know what I need to know. That's arrogance. Deceit is, I don't have to pay attention to that. And resentment is, well, things can go to hell, and so can he or she. And that's a pretty dark triad. And you don't want the spirit that embodies that to take over your life. That's for sure.
Well, that gets us to 4 then. So I think you got the order right on these, because chapter 4 is notice that opportunity lurks where responsibility has been abdicated. Now, I think we're seeing an awful lot of that these days.
Well, that's a nice inversion, because people are often resentful if they see that responsibility has been abdicated. Why isn't that person doing their job? It's like, well, hey, man, step in. at your workplace, in your family. And you think, well, I shouldn't have to do that extra work. Well, you shouldn't be a slave. You shouldn't allow yourself to be tyrannized. But if something bugs you because a responsibility is going unfulfilled, there's a great opportunity for you. And this is something I don't think we teach young people well. And one of the things, you may remember this, that was so striking about the tour was that I made a case fairly consistently that most people find the meaning that sustains them through the vicissitudes of life, not in happiness, but in responsibility. And that would bring everyone to a halt. It would always make the whole theater silent. It's like, oh, I never thought of that connection. Because maybe you want to avoid responsibility, and you can understand why. You can understand why. You hide from it. Like Abraham, one of the biblical stories, Abraham, he stays in his father's tent till he's like 80. And then God gets fed up and tells him to get the hell out and grow up. And everything that he encounters is catastrophic. He encounters tyranny. The Egyptians conspire to steal his wife. He encounters starvation and war. That is what you encounter if you go out in the world and you think, who the hell wants that? I don't want the responsibility. It's like, well, yes, you do, as it turns out. There's nothing better than responsibility. Now, I say that with some caution. I think that it's hard to say. The responsibility, I've been overwhelmed by my apparent responsibility. But I think it's also kept me alive. And I mean that literally. And so...
Wait, can you go a little deeper with that? I mean, when you were at your darkest moments in the last 2 years, whatever that might be, was it the feeling of
there's been many times in the last year where it would have been much easier for me just to be dead. That's constant. So, but no.
But is it but no because of something in you, or is it but no because of the people, that you would have abdicated that responsibility to the people? Or is that ultimately the same thing?
It.
Yeah.
Well, I do think that the two aren't easily distinguishable, but it's definitely that. It's definitely that. And it's one of the chapters, the last chapter, is be grateful in spite of your suffering. You need a meaning to sustain you through suffering. And it is the case that you find that in responsibility. Well, and so it's good advice for anyone who's at work. You're resentful about this and that because people aren't pulling their weight. Pull it. See what happens. You'll become indispensable instantly. You'll know everything. And maybe that job won't be for you, or maybe that relationship won't be for you, but you'll take your hard acquired wisdom and go elsewhere and flourish there. So, this kid stopped me. I think I wrote about this in this book. Kid stopped me in a restaurant one day when I was walking in, and he said, and he had an undergraduate degree, and he was working as a waiter in a chain steak place. And he stopped me and he said, about 6 months ago, I was watching one of your lectures and I decided to stop being resentful about my job. And he was resentful because he had a university degree and he's working as a waiter. And look, I don't have anything against waiters. It's like a waiter can make your evening, hooray. He said, well, I decided I'd start trying at my job, like really trying as if it was worthwhile. He said he got 3 promotions in 6 months, like he's just rocketing up the power hierarchy. Well, it's not power, it's competence if it's well run. And places are full of opportunity. Now, that doesn't mean social structures aren't sometimes corrupt, but you can discover that too. If you start to take responsibility and that goes sideways, you're not being credited with that, well, then that's an indication that you need to restructure the situation. Something's corrupt about it. Or if you can't do that, you should go somewhere else where that is valued. It's a sign that things aren't right. If you bring your best to the table and that isn't appreciated, there's something wrong with the table. Now, that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with tables always and everywhere, but it is the case, that, and this is something we should all get straight. when we think about hierarchies, it's an axiom of the left that hierarchies are predicated on power. It's like, no, only when they're corrupt. Well, they're always corrupt. Well, yes, that means all hierarchies are contaminated with power. Well, that isn't the essence of the hierarchy. The essence of the hierarchy is distinction of value. And that can and you need the distinction of value because you can't tell what to do otherwise. You have to do the first things first. That's a hierarchy of value. That's not power unless you're being compelled. And then it's corrupt and you should resist it.
If you'd like to see more honest and insightful conversations with Jordan Peterson himself, check out our Jordan Peterson playlist, which includes every interview I've ever done with him. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist. Both are right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.